Hello, everyone, and welcome into today's Irish NFL show with me, Colum Cronin. And I am delighted to welcome our guest today back to the Irish NFL show from 1010XL, Mia O'Brien. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic, sir. How about yourself?
I am not too shabby, though I am a Broncos fan, so I'm coming off the back of a very interesting weekend. But we'll leave that in the rearview mirror, and we will talk, I suppose, in relation to the team that are headed to London this weekend, that are having an interesting season of their own, and that is the team you cover, the Jaguars. And I think in that debate over the pronunciation of the team name, you should have had some people. They should have thrown some people from this side of the Atlantic, be they from Dublin or from London, into the mix. Why didn't that happen?
Yeah, I'll have to catch up with my boy Chris Hassel at CBS Sports because, yeah, obviously there's different dialects. They may pronounce it differently. I was upset that the girl from the Orlando area, or I shouldn't say the girl, the reporter anchor from the Orlando area, who has been a diehard fan her entire life, and yet she says it the wrong way. I was just like, honey, you can't even blame it on a Florida accent because that's not a real thing.
Well, it's an interesting situation that the Jags find themselves in, because obviously sitting at 1 and 2, not ideal as they go on the road, essentially. Even though one of the games is technically designated a home game, and one a road game, but they will be in London. But from the outside looking in, Trevor seems to be playing quite well. Travis Etienne is making people miss, but the offense can't score points. What is going on, Mia?
Yeah, that's what's most fascinating is that we knew in training camp last year that red zone, third down, those were that's when the sirens would go off, danger alert for this offense. And it proved to be true through the first few weeks of last year's season as well. Training camp this year, those drills were ran, those portions of practice came to pass, and it was boom, 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 no issues. And so I think a lot of people assumed that the Jaguars would have no issues in the red zone, no issues in third down conversion, of which they are one of the worst in the National Football League as of this writing, despite being fifth in efficiency in first and second down. And so what I think you're seeing, and this is what we've heard from the players, is as opposed to a season ago where they were playing with house money and they were the underdog and they could just play free and easy and whatever happens, happens. They do feel like they have been pressing because there is pressure to win because they should be winning. And I think you're also seeing the effects, although he disputed this post game, of the fact that Calvin Ridley has not played in the NFL for almost 2 seasons. And so the reality of it is that it's going to take him a little bit of time to get his sea legs under him. It's great that he is the best route runner in the NFL. It's great that he still has his speed. It's great that in practice on air he makes these dazzling catches. But it's not just the 3 drops he had on Sunday. It's the fact that he lined up wrong twice, and he's lined up wrong several times over the past 3 weeks of the season. And so it'll be very curious to see how they modify the game plan because they can't modify the offense at this point. I don't think it really has anything to do with the play calling, despite all the accusatory. Is it Press Taylor? Is it Doug? PR wise, that was a disaster move on the Jaguars' part to announce it the morning of the first game. But the reality is that Press Taylor called the second half of games last season. The Jags were a better second half team than they were a first half team last year. And Doug still has confidence in Press Taylor. I don't think that the play calling per se has been the issue, although it has looked clunky at times. I think a lot of this is Johnny's and Joe's as opposed to X's and O's.
And in terms of the defense, because we pick games over here for fun, not for betting. But all the talk in the lead up to this game, obviously, look, there's the Texans for some reason seem to have the Jags number, but it was like the Texans line was in bits, and there was so many issues. But the Jags pass rush was non-existent. And like I know Doug got asked about it afterwards, and I saw the nigh on 30-second pause as he considered what he was going to say. But there's got to be real concerns about that, Mia, right?
Right. So here's a stat that my good friend John Shipley at Sports Illustrated just put out there. Let me pull it up for you. Let's make sure, hopefully, our internet connection is staying all right here. Over 40% of the Texans' passing yards on Sunday came on two Tank Dell catches, which was blown coverage by the Jaguars secondary. That was Darius Williams. That was miscommunication between Rayshon Jenkins and Andre Sisco. So you take the 40% of that production out and it changes the complexity of the game, but that's also the National Football League. Games are decided by 2 or 3 plays. That is the most troubling part for me because the secondary was the one area of this defense that I wasn't worried about. I thought, okay, those 4 guys, and when they bring Trey Herndon in, yes, people are worried about him in the nickel. They're going to be in zone most of the time. That's where he thrives. They're going to have a lot of blitzes from Sisco to Herndon to Rayshon as well, which obviously we saw in the win over the Titans in the season finale last year. So I wasn't so worried about the secondary, but those miscommunication moments, that's a little troubling. We knew the pass rush because they were banking on development and hope, although hope may not be a strategy. They were banking on that being how that they would be able to get to the quarterback, that Caleb Chason would develop, Trayvon Walker become an all-pro, Josh Allen in a contract year would produce big time, and maybe you'd get a little bit of contribution from Yasir Abdullah, the 5th-round rookie. They obviously are not seeing that to the numbers that they were hoping to. Part of that, I think, is the fact that no one saw the Devon Hamilton situation coming. It's obviously an unfortunate non-football illness situation. He is in the building. Doug Peterson has hinted he doesn't really have a timetable, maybe around the bye. That's week 8. That's concerning because he looked awesome in training camp. And if he can create that interior pressure, then that helps those guys on the edge. Instead, you have a half-healthy Foley Fatukasi, again, and Roy Robertson Harris having to carry the bulk of the load with some rotational guys creating that interior push. The 2 guys they have on the edge, because Trayvon Walker really should be playing on the interior, in my opinion, although he certainly can flex out as well, but in spots, those 2 guys need that interior push if they're going to get to a quarterback. The reason Josh Allen had 10.5 sacks his rookie season was because he had Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue helping him. And for what it's worth, he had Marcel Darius creating a push on the interior as well. He needs those guys if he's going to put up double-digit sack numbers, and he doesn't have the horses for courses right now.
And obviously now going on the road against a Falcons team who are something of an enigma themselves. They have a coach in Arthur Smith who very much does things his way, and I describe him, I think, as the antithesis of Brandon Staley, because Staley seems to sway by what the crowd says, and he's gone away from maybe going for it in 4th down. Then he suddenly goes for it last weekend. Given that didn't work out, let's see what happens. But Arthur Smith has the courage of his convictions, like him or not. He decides what he's going to do. But we have seen, the good side of Desmond Ridder, the bad side of Desmond Ridder. They have lots of weapons. And obviously in Bijan, they have, a player who has kind of dazzled during the opening weeks. What's the expectation on the ground in Jacksonville as the Jags make this trip to London for the next 2 games?
Well, I've seen a lot of feedback from fans. I didn't hear this because I was interviewing Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence in the press conference room at the time, that Christian Kirk stressed they need a change of scenery to get out of their own way, to get away from the yips. And so perhaps this road trip, if you may, is exactly what the doctor called for this offense. We were just talking about it on my daily program. Like, this offense is too good on paper to not perform. This is not a situation like in 2018 where the Jaguars were talent deficient on offense and it came back to rear its ugly head. They are very talented on offense, and obviously if that offense produces, that will help the defense keep them afloat as well and give them more opportunities because they're playing with a lead. That's what the Jaguars are banking on. I think that will come to fruition at some point this season. Is it next week? Jaguar fans are certainly hoping so. I think that, excuse me, when it comes to the Falcons, they truly are an enigma because they are similar to the 2017 Jaguars, ironically, banking on we have an elite defense that we invested in highly in free agency, and we also have these young guys. This is the part where they're different than the Jaguars of 2017, elite playmakers to go along with, this is the tie-in, a game manager at quarterback. Blake Bortles, Desmond Ridder, not going to put them in the same boat. Obviously, one was drafted a little bit later than the other. But as of this writing, Desmond Ridder is 28th in yards per attempt, which is a little concerning if you're the Falcons and if the Jaguars and their top 10 rated run defense are able to neutralize Bijan Robinson, or at the very least hold him to the pedestrian numbers. And I say pedestrian, even though it felt like he was pummeling the Jags at times on Sunday. Dameon Pierce held to 14 carries, 31 yards. Dameon Pierce, a human wrecking ball who rocked the Jaguars for almost 100 yards in the one meeting he played in last year. If this defense can neutralize the run, the one thing I think they are really good at, that's Trayvon Walker's strong point. That is where the game will be put into Ritter's hands. It helps to have guys like Kyle Pitts and Drake London on the outside, but can he get the ball downfield to them? And can the Jaguars communicate in the back end and cover those guys too?
And I suppose in terms of on this side, like the games at Tottenham Hotspur are very popular. This is a stadium that was built for the NFL. The game at Wembley, there was the initial kind of rush of excitement, but there are still a kind of a significant patch of tickets available. And we know that the NFL itself is keen to grow the game continually globally. We've seen the growth of flag. There's talk, we know, about potentially a game in Madrid, a game in Rio. Do you think like we continue to see the Jags push for more games in London, or is this, might they be content to having had this experience with the two now, that they might just go back to kind of one game as such?
Well, we'll evaluate that in 3 weeks when they return, or 2 weeks, I guess, when they return, because we'll see how this trip goes, because it is a great social experiment at the end of the day. But I think that what will be very fascinating to see, to bring it back on this side of the pond, is the fact that the Jaguars are currently in negotiations for a new stadium. And if you are going to ask $1 billion of the city of Jacksonville's taxpayers and the city of Jacksonville, there is a notion that then you should not be taking home games away from the city to London. Once every 4 or 5 years, great. Every season, just because, well, it's a small media market and therefore we need to make up the cost. We need to create revenue on the back half. I mean, listen, I understand the Green Bay Packers have been around a lot longer than the Jacksonville Jaguars, but that is a smaller media market. Jacksonville has approximately 100 some odd people moving here every single day. It's not to the extent of a Nashville, but it is a city that is on the rise and growing. And if you put out a winning product, you'll see crowds in Jacksonville like you saw at the end of last season, especially when it's against marquee opponents. Obviously, against the Houston Texans, it was expected that you wouldn't fill the stadium to the brim, but obviously probably would have liked to have seen a few more. That, though, is literally the evidence for why the Jaguars management can say, hey, we need to go to London because we need to make some more money, bring it back, invest it in the city. That's how we invested in the product for the stadium. I get it. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, the Jaguars in particular are so unique in that question, because there is so much also going on over here in the financial realm and rebuilding and renovating the stadium.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see. I think the games in Germany last year opened NFL eyes to the possibilities, because I think some people on that side of the Atlantic were surprised, just how keen fans were for NFL football. In terms of the Jags, I suppose, divisional rivals, the Titans were such a weird one, right? Because everyone kind of went into the season kind of going, well, who are the Titans? What are the Titans? They're putting it all on, the Tannehill and Henry, and trying to run it back yet again. But the Texans, I suppose there was a lot of, respect with D'Amico, and they were rebuilding and picks 2 and 3. But the Colts had such a strange, now, I'm a massive Shane Steichen fan. I think there was a lot of hype around him. Then he goes in there. Then they have a soap opera. They had what we've sometimes seen in Jacksonville, but their entire offseason was a soap opera. The owner gets involved. There's all sorts of stuff happening now around the NFL, filing grievances with the NFLPA around RBs in particular, and injuries and all. So this has sparked a whole lot of things. But ultimately, the Colts just beat the Ravens to sit atop the AFC South. Is this a surprising on that side of the Atlantic, Mia?
Extremely. Although, of course, Jacksonville's excited because they own the tiebreaker against the Colts. So if they win against the Falcons this weekend, it's all hunky dory in Duval in terms of standings. Also, it was Gardner Minshew that led to that win against the Baltimore Ravens. And obviously, people in this city are still massive Gardner fans. I mean, if you were drafting any quarterback not named Trevor Lawrence, he would have given much more of a fair shake to compete for the starting role in 2021. And we all still root for Gardner to this day in this town, and his family is great. And so obviously people here are like, well, if there's anybody who's going to be ahead of us for, hopefully just a week or so, glad it's Gardner. Because I don't know exactly what the timetable is right now for Anthony Richardson and the concussion protocol. And also, and I'll ask you this, I said this all last week on multiple programs here on 1010XL. 3 wide receivers, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, John Mechie when healthy. Those 3, right? Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman Jr. You have to pick one of those sets for the next 10 years. Who are you taking?
Oh, that's a good one. That is I'm probably going with what the Texans have. I think.
Bingo. Yes, exactly. And that's no knock on how the Colts have built their offensive structure in Indianapolis. I just think those 3 guys, and I've heard this from people that worked with Indianapolis during their install period, they're not winning any get off the bus awards, and they're not winning any 40-yard dashes. And that's what you need in this league. And not that I think Christian Kirk is winning a 40-yard dash for what it's worth against some of the other guys in the league, but I think a Jamal Agnew could. I think a Calvin Ridley could. And so you need to have wide receivers that offer you a variety of different things, which is what Jacksonville has attempted to build. And not saying that the Colts can't succeed with those 3 guys, that they can't compete for a division title. But then when you combine that with no run game, with all due respect to Zach Moss, because, how long is that going to last, knowing he's coming off of a broken hand? They already waived Deion Jackson, who started the opener for them, and the Jonathan Taylor saga is no end in sight. And you have a rookie quarterback. I have now covered Jim Irsay for 5 years, Colum, and I can tell you this. He will be going back to Anthony Richardson, even if Gardner Minshew has to start the next 3 weeks and they go 3-0. He will be going back to AR. For good, for bad. Maybe it's not a bad thing for AR to sit back and watch either. He is an electric player. As I've said on this program, I've said on many others. I've known him since he was in high school. Great leader, great kid, physical freak. But can he be expected to command an offense where it's not like the Falcons, where there's so much veteran presence, there's so many dynamic playmakers around him that he just has to focus on himself? That's not the case in Indy.
Yeah, no, that I look. I think to me, Jim Irsay is ultimately the fly in the ointment, because I do think what Steichen has done, and as you said, like, they don't have the weapons, but they have 74 points. I mean, I think there are maybe 3 teams in the entire AFC who have more points than them. I mean, they've been quite phenomenal. Now, they've also given up a significant number of points, and that's the other side of the coin that they have to figure out. But it's year 1, and you are trying to negotiate a very fine kind of tightrope.
Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this. If you have to buy stock in one of the 4 teams in the AFC South for the next 5 years, because if all these things come to pass, if Shane Steichen is able to jumpstart the offense and Anthony Richardson is who we think he is, if what we saw from the Texans this week is what they're going to be, who are you buying stock in of the 4?
Irsay is the reason I don't. I don't get. I love Dougie P, and I think Trevor Lawrence can go on to be the number 2. And I don't say that lightly, because Justin Herbert is something else. But I think Trevor Lawrence has that much talent. But I think Shane Steichen is a very special coach. I don't think enough people realize it as yet. His feel for how to call a game, his understanding of his players, I think is just incredible. But ultimately, Khan is a much more stable presence than Jim Irsay. The Jags need to sort out the defense. I agree with you. I mean, I think the offense is stuttering, but I think, they'll get this going. My concern is on the defense. But when I look at it and I say, if I in a 5-year period, No, that's the Jags. Because do you trust Jim Irsay
No,
next
no.
April not to say to Chris Ballard, no, we're going to do this in the draft?
No, exactly. And that's why he's my favorite meme on the internet, and it's for a good reason. It's with all due respect to the good people of Indianapolis. They know what they signed up for. Banners fly forever for a reason. But yeah, it stinks because it is a pretty good defense too, for what it's worth up in Indianapolis. Just unfortunately, some of the shortcomings in the roster makeup, and a lot of it's due to the owner, not the head coach.
Indeed. I am intrigued to hear from you, like outside of the AFC South and opening it up to the rest of the seven divisions, either conference. What are some of the things that have caught your eye in the first 3 weeks? It can be positive surprises. It can be you've been in a way kind of shocked that something kind of hasn't come to pass. But looking around the league, for you, Mia, what is it that you think, wow, that's really interesting?
Well, we'll hit a couple. We'll start with last night, which is the Cincinnati Bengals and the Jaguars offenses are literally the Spider-Man memes of each other right now. Obviously, for the Bengals, largely it's because of Joe Burrow's injury. The Jaguars don't have that excuse, but I did see just such lack of creativity in the first half to go vertical to push down the field. And that's what Jacksonville's been struggling with. And Jacksonville has also been plagued by drops, a league leading 9. T. Higgins lets 2 go right through his mitts inexplicably, just like Calvin Ridley with his 3 on Sunday. They're literally identical twins of each other. And I think when all is said and done, that's a team that has started 0-2 each of the last 3 seasons and claws their way out of it. For whatever the reason, both squads like to peak at the right time and just drive their fan bases crazy, which is a lot of fun. The Dolphins are the obvious answer. For me, I'm not surprised because I think Mike McDaniels is a great coach, great play caller. But the reality is, Tua has not played an entire season healthy in the National Football League or in college football. He has never completed a full season. So until we get to week 8 and he's still out there, I'm going to have some trepidation about the Dolphins. Um, as far as other surprises, I'm not surprised by the Niners. I'm not surprised by the Broncos being awful. I was surprised by the Cowboys and the upset at the hands of the Cardinals, but that's the league these days. If I could give you one more, it probably would be the Rams, who I predicted to actually earn the number 1 overall pick next year and get the opportunity to keep Caleb Williams in the City of Angels of Los Angeles. Obviously, we're 3 games into this, but Puka Nacua has been a revelation. He actually was a guy I was pretty high on during the pre-draft process. Matt Stafford looks healthy. A team that was made up of 50% rookies has been able to function with some of the best teams in the league. Sean McVay is obviously a great coach and a great play caller, but I'm curious to see if this trend continues or if my earlier prediction comes to fruition and they are picking in the top 3 this upcoming April.
I am just to dig in terms of the Broncos, and I think Denver media has a real tendency to be very kind to the team and hype them in the off season. But did you really think it would be this bad?
Yes, I did. Because Sean Payton didn't stick his nose out there and say how awful it was because he doesn't like Nathaniel Hackett. He said it because he needed to create a buffer for when it was this bad. What's upsetting for me and perhaps surprising is that defense, that despite the shortcomings of its head coach, each of the past 2 regimes was still an elite top 10 tier defense. And the fact that they just gave up 70 points is absolutely stunning to me. That's the part that's shocking. I'm not surprised the offense is sputtering. I'm not surprised all 3 phases coming to cohesion is taking time, because I knew the moment Sean Payton opened his mouth, he saw what it was, and he's trying to buy himself some time. Thankfully, Deion Sanders is doing what he's doing north of Denver, so it's all good because most of the Denver media is focused on the Buffs anyways.
Indeed, and look, I don't, I think what's interesting when I look back to week 3 of last year, that both the Broncos and the Bears actually won, and both were sitting at 2-1. I am only for their seasons to
Are you ready for
play.
a fun fact? Actually, speaking of both of those two, I'm going to
Yes.
pull it up right now because my colleague Hayes Carlyon noted that the 49ers, Chargers, Seahawks, and Bengals all started 1-2 last year. All 4 made the playoffs. The 49ers, largely the same outfit as this year, and they look like the best team in football, lost to the Bears and the Broncos in the first 3 games last season. And granted, that was with Trey Lance, the starting quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo was inserted midway through that loss to the Broncos. But it's still Kyle Shanahan, still that defense, and they went 1-2 to start the year, and they lost to both those 2 teams.
Indeed, and that's why I think for the Jags, I mean, ultimately it was Justin Simmons intercepting Trevor Lawrence last year that changed things. Maybe London is where they, get it going again this year. Mia, for fans on this side of the Atlantic who want to check out more of your stuff, and I would advocate that they do. And if you're not following Mia on Twitter, you should be. But also, Mia's your pinned tweet, the GIF is absolutely perfect.
Shout out to my boy Noah Thomas with the University of North Florida. And if you've seen any of the Jags hype videos with Stranger Things and Star Wars, he's the kid on Twitter who makes all those. But yeah, he snapped that one for me last year while I was working sidelines.
Where can people on this side of the Atlantic check you out though, other than Twitter?
Yes. So Twitter, and of course, I am a host here on 1010XL. So we live stream our shows daily on YouTube now. That's been a big initiative of mine since I took over in that role, and they created the role about a year and a half ago. So 12 to 3 Eastern is when you can catch me on XL Primetime. Tuesday nights, I also host our all-female show, Helmets and Heels. Pretty much all the 1010XL channels from Twitter to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I'm in a lot of the videos as the video director. So you can check all those out there. And then, of course, Twitter and then Instagram as well. I'm Mobrian_16 there. Don't do as much posting per se, but at 1010XL Jax on Instagram. Oh, yeah, there's a whole lot of Mobrian there.
Well, appreciate you taking the time. And again, as I said last time, hopefully we see you on this little green island in the not too distant future.
That is definitely the hope. And if not for work, then definitely to visit because I miss my people over there and haven't been back since 2016. So hopefully sooner rather than later.